Hello everyone, and as always, once again a warm welcome back to the Dr. Balmer channel. Now, for those of you who know, I have sort of a series going on now with 3 generations of HP Mini PCs that look pretty much just like this. And the first video has been published. It was equipped with an Intel i5-7200U CPU, 16 gigs of RAM. Yeah, so that was the first sort of generation that I had, that PC. Now, the reason for making this video now was that I was upgrading my Mini PC setups, and the first generation I sold to a close friend for a very low price, so I wanted to make a video of it before that. And this one is not a new one that I have bought now. This is one that I've been using for several years, just as the previous one. So this is the second one of the 3, and we can see here that this is also has a Intel Core i5 7th gen. So the other one was the 6500T, so this should have a 7000 something CPU, so it's slightly newer. If we turn this around, you can see I have on the VESA stand, or the VESA hole spacing, I have mounted a rubbery feet that I got off of AliExpress or something, with a screw hole in the middle, so there's a little bit of a distance when it stands, and it doesn't move around, and basically vibration damping, since I wanted to have it in a quiet sort of environment. Also, this one did not have or does not have Wi-Fi built in, however, so I have solved it using in this case a TP-Link Wi-Fi plug. Now, just as the previous Mini PC that we looked at in part 1, this comes with a power adapter, also spec'd at 65 watts. And we will check the power consumption under different loads to see how much this one draws. Now, what do we have in terms of connectivity? Well, we have the power in, we have an RJ45 Ethernet connection, Kensington lock, 1, 2, 3, 4 USB, and it actually, let's see here, there is sort of a keyboard, I think, there. So these are not high-speed USB ports, maybe USB 2, I think. And then we have super speed, at least on this framed USB port here. But we have 4 USB ports, so that's nice. And we have a serial port, it seems, a COM port. That's not something you see too often today. And then we have a D-sub analog port and 1 HDMI. So this differs a bit. We have the 1 HDMI here. The previous one had only display ports, if I'm not mistaken. there's a bit of dust. So this seems like this is a sort of a maybe a negative pressure system, because we have a lot of dust buildup in all the ports here, and on the front side a lot of dust has collected in the vents here. So this is what will happen in terms of maintenance, sort of, and we can see that there's dust in the USB ports also, so it seems to draw in air here, and yeah, we have two USB ports here and one headset combined port here and a power button and an almost invisible LED right now. The dimensions are the same as for the previous ones, so I will have to clean this up using some compressed air, which we'll do. But we can also, let's open it up, and there's a screw here. And I think the front goes like that, and then you just lift it off. And what have we got here? So for those of you who have seen the part 1 with the first generation of these PCs, you may recall that this looks a little bit different, although very similar. Hang on. This actually has a VLAN. So this should have Wi-Fi. That's interesting. Maybe I just didn't have any drivers or something for it. So I shouldn't need this stick, but I've had it installed for many years. Well, maybe, I don't know how many years, but 5 or 6 years or so. So this is also not the newest and greatest, latest and greatest, maybe it's called. But yeah, so there is a VLAN chip, and we have an SSD, M2 SSD, SK Hynix. I think it's 256 gigabytes. We have easy access to the CMOS battery, and well, it's not too much. There's not too much dust here, but this blower fan does blow out air on the backside, so that explains why the front is dusty. So we do get a negative pressure system here. So all dust will sort of collect, and all air will go through all crevices of the chassis, and basically dust will collect there. And just as the previous generation, we have a fan that you can lift off and like this, and reveal the RAM. So we have one Samsung and one RAM axle, two 8 gigabytes, 8 gigabyte modules. I think that when I bought this, it might have had 8 gigabytes, and I upgraded it. And we have different. Maybe I had some lying around, which I used. Yeah, and then we have the CPU cooler and stuff. So, however, I shall give this a nice dust off, and I will be right back with you. Okay, I have dusted this off. It now looks a lot better, and also the front side looks a lot better. So it was a quick dust off. Now let's turn this on. I have connected my keyboard and my display over here, but before we focus on the display and all that, let's turn it on. And I think I have to push a button over here. with something without reassembling the top cover for the bottom part. Let's see if I can manage. Yeah, something made of metal is not the best thing, but when having open cases. There we have it. So what I want to demonstrate is a little issue. Let me place my microphone over here. Can you hear that? Yeah. So, yeah. There's a sort of a vibration. But when I push on it, the shell of it, it sort of stops. So yeah, not very nice. I think this has been running for many years, and well, it's done its part. It still works. There is air coming out in the back here, and it spins, but so I'm yeah. What I would like to do is, before we do anything else, I would like to replace this fan. I think that would be a nice thing to include in this video. It sort of works, but there is some vibration, and I don't know if it's the bearings or just the shell, but usually with fans that are sort of shutting down, you get sort of these vibrations. Yeah, and it stops pretty quickly as well. It doesn't spin too well on its own. I don't know if it should or not, but usual fans tend to spin a bit more than this. So allow me to disconnect the power supply. And yeah, so I got this from AliExpress, which should fit. I basically searched the model number and got this one. I don't remember what this cost, but a few dollars maybe. Let's inspect this one. And you get actually also a multi-use plastic bag, which is nice. Now, we can disconnect this as well, so we get a free movement here. We have a small cable which is fastened under some sort of holders over there and then over here, and then we have a proprietary sort of, it looks like, connector here. And yeah, the fan itself should be pretty easy to remove, but let's compare the spinability. Yeah, this one spins a lot more freely than this one. So I think the bearings are perhaps dust ingress or something has done its job. So yeah, let's try to unfasten this. So this was over here and we unfastened it like that, and then this one over here, and let's try to remove the... Yeah, that was fairly easy. So it's turned this way around with the two little pegs on the front side heading over there, and the connector side sort of latches pointing towards me. Now let's remove that and take the new fan, which feels a lot better, yes. And we will orient it the same way. I suppose it only goes in one way, but let's try to do it on camera if possible. Yeah, pretty easy. And then let's try to route this sort of the way it was. So I suppose we could place it. My hand will be in the way, but you will see the end result, I suppose, over there. And then this one underneath that little hook. Just like that. And then yeah, so these little pegs here should go into these little guide rails over here and on the chassis over here. So let's try to do that over there, and then this one align it over there. Almost. This might be a little bit longer lead here, which sort of springs up the fan, but we shall manage. It doesn't do a whole lot if it, yeah, isn't exactly in the correct routing here. It's an insulated cable, so maybe something like that. I don't know. Like this, maybe? Right. So there we have that, and it fits perfectly. So let's connect this and see what this sounds like and the airflow sort of feeling. And I'll have to turn this on once again using something. So I will push that button. It spins, at least. Very slowly currently, but gaining speed now, losing speed. It didn't like it. Okay. Shall we try it again? That's odd. it doesn't like it. Is it the wrong model? Is it some kind of RPM thing? I think I got the same model number. How odd. Let's try a third time. There is a green LED over there. I don't know if it's, yeah, over there. Yeah, but it doesn't like it. That's very interesting. Okay, let's could it be an RPM sort of thing? Although this one, the old one, wasn't really spinning that good. And it's disintegrating, the foam pad here. I suppose let's remove this. So we have a HP part number, which is L19561-001, and this one, yeah, we have a FCN 4CF83FAT. This is FCN 4C80FA. Did I get the wrong part? That would be unfortunate. But we don't know yet. Maybe I have ruined this altogether. Let's connect back the old original fan. Like that, and plug in some power and start this up again. Maybe it's very sensitive. This one is faster from start. See if I can enter some BIOS or something. Yeah, now it runs, so I suppose I got the wrong one. It should be 83. No, sorry, this one is 83, but this one is 80 in the numbering here. So, well, I have to check. This was like AliExpress thing, so either I ordered the wrong one or I got the wrong one. But anyhow, this doesn't, well, the procedure, at least for replacing the fan, is the same. You have seen it now, and it's fairly simple. However, be careful then to get the exact correct model number, because as we have just seen, it does make a difference. It will basically not boot if you have the wrong one. So yeah, I will check on AliExpress if I got the wrong one or they sent me the wrong one. One moment, please. Yes, so I looked it up on AliExpress, and well, there is basically, well, when I search for the part number with the 80 instead of 83, which I got, I get one listing, and it costs, well, there's an upcoming sale. It will cost 217 Swedish kronor, which is about $23. So that's a bit more than what I paid for this fan. This one was about $14-15 US equivalent. But there's only one listing for a replacement fan for this one, and it's a lot, well, more expensive. But the sale starts in 8 hours, so maybe I can combine it with some coupon or something, or find this fan other place. So yeah. However, yeah, this is unfortunate, but it's very good to know that we have this kind of sensitivity, and the fan, the old one, still spins, so that's good at least. Yeah, but there we have it. So now we have seen the innards, we have tried to replace the fan, and we realized something very important. And also, I think it's time to do the performance testing. I think actually let's head into maybe the BIOS first and check the settings for what we have there, if there are some interesting fan settings maybe. So let's do that. So I have entered the BIOS and we shall have a look, but I checked on eBay and found last item available, and we see the part number is the A80 here, and it's a DC 5 volt 0.5 amps 4 pin, so this looks like it's correct, and $14 US, which is a lot less than 200, or sorry, 25 or was $23, and then $874 US shipping, and it will arrive in May. So since I intend, at least my idea is to use this as an HP PC at my father's place. In the bedroom, I would like it to be quiet, and I don't want the fan to be an issue. So maybe I should buy the one off of eBay. It was shipped from Germany, so it should arrive at some point. However, let's refocus our attention onto the BIOS and the available options there. So the BIOS looks very crude and sort of 30 years back in time feeling. But let's go into system information first, because let's have a look at what kind of PC this is. And oh, I have no mouse here, so but that's okay, we can manage. I just have to find something to poke around with, maybe my finger. So this is an HP 260 G3 DM, and well, Yeah, Intel i5-7200U CPU at 2.5 GHz. And we have 16 gigabytes of DDR4 2133 MHz dual channel. So this is not the these are not the specifications in their full extent, but at least we have one sort of feeling. It's also say born on date, well, 15th of June 2020, but I think maybe that was the BIOS revision from, no, the BIOS date is 27th of December 23. So it's good that HP has at least released some BIOSes as far as 23. But yeah, so I've had it for several years. Right now it's April in the year of 2026. But there we have it. So this is a different kind of model than we had in the first part. Storage, security, device security, but I don't think that this is just power, OS power management enabled, hardware power management, wake on LAN right now is disabled, power on from USB keyboard port, that would be nice, enable, and wake on LAN could also be nice. In a thermal CPU fan speed. Okay, so we have about 1800 RPMs, but I can't really, well, advanced power on options, post message, that's always nice to enable, after power loss off, post delay none, local hardware, hard drive, remote wake up boot source, wake on LAN power on password policy. Okay, maybe I didn't accept the, yeah, I didn't do, I have to press F10 to save. BIOS power on. Oh, you can schedule power on and off. That's pretty cool. But power, yeah, onboard devices, serial port enabled, bus options, nothing of interest here, device options, hyperthreading enabled, HP application driver disabled. Yeah, I don't see any sort of monitoring of the fan speed override, so I can use another fan, but so I suppose I will have to buy that fan from eBay, since I intend to use this PC. Okay, but there we have it. Now let me turn this off, save the settings, and then turn this off, and then we shall start the performance testing in the same way that we did in the first part, and then in the very end we will compare them performance wise. So the 6500T CPU was not a U class CPU, this is a 7200U. So next generation up, sort of, but for ultra sort of low power, like for what do they call them? Ultrabooks sort of type CPU with the U on the end. But yeah, so one moment please, and we will be right back with some performance and checking the full specs of this. Right, so let's start off with the Hardware Info 64 summary page. So the CPU is an Intel Core i5-7200U, and that is a Kaby Lake U type of CPU. Its TDP is 15 watts. It's a 14 nanometer part. So yeah, it's not the very newest sort of. And well, we have 2 cores and 4 threads, and I believe the 6500T had 4 cores, 4 threads. So it will be interesting to see how this sort of Kaby Lake U part will face off against the 6500T. Both in CPU performance, but also if we check the graphics, that's the Intel HD Graphics 620, while the 6500T system had an iGPU which was the HD530, I believe, right? So yeah. Also, we can see that we have 2 memory banks with 2 different sticks of RAM. So 16 gigabytes in total. Yes. And the system is an HP 260G3DM. Now that we have settled that, let's start off with AIDA64. Ooh, and I also actually noticed that there is a new driver from 6th of April 2026 this year, and for the graphics. And today is the 12th of April 2026. So a 6-day-old driver. So therefore I am updating it so we have the latest and greatest to get the most sort of accurate scores in our performance testing. Now this system isn't a clean install, and also I should mention that this is Windows 10, so this system does not natively support Windows 11. Of course you can sideload it in different ways perhaps, but officially the Windows 11 is not supported through like Windows Update and you know, with the official requirements, which is good to know. Anyway, yes, so we are installing the drivers and we'll be right back. We'll start with AIDA64 still. Right, new GPU drivers installed, and we are in AIDA64. Now, just idling on the sensors page, I can see a power draw of 7. Well, it jumps around a bit, but let's allow it to stabilize a bit. I'm checking the power meter on the side here. So it's about 6.5 to 6.5 watts or so. 7.5 up to 12 or 14 watts. So in true idle it's about 6.5 watts, which is pretty good for a system of this age, and even though it is a low power part, but yeah, CPU packages are like, in AIDA64 at least, it's jumping around from 2 to 10 watts depending on the load, I suppose. Temperatures from 48 to 65 C. Of course our CPU fan isn't in the best conditions right now, but I think we will be fine. And this is not like chasing the best performance out of the system. This is more of a sort of a checking the general performance of this generation of the HP Mini PC. So let's do a benchmark quick report in HTML and see where we end up. So watching this report being generated with the tests, the highest power draw currently is 33.3 watts on the FP32 ray trace, and now we're on FP64 ray trace, and I see a power draw of 25 watts. So, but 33, let's say 35 watts. That's So, while the report was being generated, during the CPU load, the FPU tests did draw the most amount of power, and I saw 33.5 watts as the highest, and let's say 35 watts. So that's pretty much CPU only load. Now it will be interesting in 3D Mark and PC Mark to see the power draw later on here, but let's start over here, shall we? Right, so memory read is up first, and that is of course very specific, not only to the memory controller, but the type of memory and the speeds of the memory and the cache latencies, of course. So in this case, we'll land at 30,467. So maybe we should zoom in a bit more on this. Yeah, of course this will affect the performance, but it's also something that I believe the system supports 2133 speeds, so yeah. Anyway, still 30.5 gigabytes per second. Now, memory write 31,462, which is higher than the read, but still pretty much the same scores. Memory copy 26,784. So yeah, this doesn't really say much, but we'll just pretty much skip the memory part for now. 68.4 nanoseconds. We will compare these figures later on with the previous system from part 1. Now, CPU test, checkmate, so some chess. We have 424 as a score, and that places us, well, about 20 points above a 6-core i7-990X, which is an old CPU, of course, by today's standards. But just for comparison, so Ryzen 5 2400G would have a score of 762, or Core i7 4930K would be at 573 points. So yeah. Okay, photo works, so some photo editing. We get, let's see here, we got 13,374 megapixels per second. Now this is comparable, pretty much the same score, 500 or so, 600 points more has the Core i7 4770. So yeah, and well, we will compare these figures with the system in part 1 with the 6500T at the end of this video, so do suffer through this for now. The zlib, compression, decompression perhaps, 135.4 megabytes per second. It places us pretty much at the same score as a 4-core Core 2 Extreme QX6700, which is a very, very old system. Even the Phenom 2 X4 Black 940 scores higher. So yeah, we have some pretty low scores actually. AES cryptography. Now we got 7042 megabytes per second, and that is like a bulldozer era. Yeah, we're pretty close to the A10-7850K. For those of you who follow the overclocking series on the GPUs, we use a 7850K, although overclocked. So this is performing a little worse than a stock A10-7850K. So we're not quite high performant, so to speak. Although the CPU is a sort of U part, 7200U, so it's only a 2-core system with hyper-threading, but 2 cores with hyper-threading is not a whole lot in the year of 2026. So some hashing. Let's see here. 630 megabytes per second. That's yeah, so we passed the 7850K in this test by well, 30, 40, 50 megabytes per second or so. But pretty much this performs like a 7850K. FPU Julia, so we get 13,082 points, which is comparable to, well, a bulldozer era FX8350 CPU with sort of 8 fake cores, or well, slightly higher than a 6-core Phenom 2 X6 Black 1100T. So that was a nice CPU in its time, but a lot more power hungry than this one, of course. So even though we're not performing like at the very top of these charts, we must remember that this is an old system, and we'll perform on these levels with a very much lower power draw. So it's not all bad. FPU Mandel, we get 6764. Once again, right in between the FX8350 bulldozer and the X6 1100T Phenom 2 CPU. So we're sort of in that ballpark. These are of course old CPUs, but we are running a 2-core system here. So FPU Sinjulia, let's see here, there 1860. So 1860 points. Now the 1100T CPU is far away. It's a lot higher in the scores at 3,213 points, while we only have 1,860. So yeah, the FPU part here is not very high performant on this system. FP32 Ray Trace is up next, and 2,739 kilorays per second. Once again, the FX8350 is not far away, only below. So and the X6 Black 1100T is also there, even further down below at 1982 kilorays. So yeah, the performance differs a whole lot depending on the load for different CPUs, but sometimes we're scoring higher, sometimes a bit lower than the bulldozer and the Phenom 2 CPUs that we are focused on, sort of. FP64 ray trace finally. We get 1385 kilorays per second. Pretty much the same score. 1388 has the FX8350 Bulldozer CPU. So yeah. And the Phenom 2 is quite a bit lower at 1037 kilorays per second. Right, so that was the final part of the ADA64. I will save these figures and we will then compare them against the first generation that we had of the HP Mini PC, the 6500T based system. That will be very interesting to see. Yeah, this kind of system with the 7200U, I suppose you can find pretty cheaply as well as the first generation that we had with 6500T. These are not as common as the 6500T systems as I have seen around here, but they are pretty much the same price, I would say, somewhere around $100 or so equivalent, or just north of it, depending on the RAM. I think with 8 GB of RAM they're very cheap, and then if you want 16 GB of RAM, you either buy with 8 and upgrade with another stick of 8, or if you buy with 16 you will have to pay a little bit more for the system from start. So yeah, and this is a 16 GB system that I have right here. So great. Now the next part will be PC Mark, I think, and then at the grand finale we will do the 3D Mark stuff and see how the GPU performs. We of course also have some GPU tests in PC Mark 10 as well, but not to the same extent. And even though the CPU might be actually weaker here than the 6500T, I think that that is not the entire truth to it, because we have a newer generation of CPU, and also, even though we have maybe fewer cores, but we also have a newer iGPU with the HD 630, was it? Or 620. Now I don't remember, but anyway. Right, PC Mark 10 is up next. Right, so PC Mark 10 has completed, and well, the overall score is 2,977 points. Now I don't remember what we had on the 6500T system in the first part in this series, but this might be higher. I think it was 2000 something there as well, not sure, but we will compare all the numbers and figures at the end of this video. So the Essentials score, we have 5,568 points. Maybe I can zoom in a bit. App startup 4,221, video conferencing 6,126, web browsing 6,678. So yeah, pretty even scores. The app startup score is a little lower than the other ones, but which drags the overall down here. But and we have some specifics here, but it's an okay score for this system, I would say. And also, if we then compare to the productivity score, it's also in the 5,000s. So can we say that this is pretty balanced system for productivity and essentials? So whether you're sort of concerned about the video conferencing or web browsing, or app startup, you should be pretty well satisfied, I suppose, getting a pretty even experience, as well as in the productivity part with the spreadsheet score being the lowest here, but the writing score getting almost 9,000 points at 8,970. Spreadsheet 3,391 points, giving an overall of 5,515 points. So I don't know why the spreadsheet score is low, but maybe also open document and copy and compute, copy data. I don't know, maybe the open document part and save document, maybe there's a correlation to the startup score. That could of course perhaps be affected by the SSD choice. This is an M2 SSD, but I mean it's a value line sort of SSD. It's not a high performance SSD. Simply just an NVMe M.2 SSD. So maybe these two scores could be correlated. I don't know, but it seems like it. And just as with the first system we had a look at in the previous video on the HP Mini PCs, the digital content creation suffers a bit here and drags the overall score down. So we get 2,333 points here. The photo editing score is 3,274, which is the highest of these three. Still, it's not a very high score. Rendering and visualization score is 1,416, and video editing score is 2,742. So yeah, there we have it. But yeah, I suppose that rendering and visualization is low. We still have an iGPU, so ray tracing is not maybe the target audience for this system. And graphics, of course, it's still an HD 630 or something, so iGPU from several years back. So yeah, and the video editing score, I mean, it's not high, but just as on the other system in part 1, I did do some video editing on it when I was traveling, and I got the job done, but you know, the experience wasn't the best, let's say, but it worked. In Clipchamp I used, so yeah. But at least I think this system is sort of, I think that yeah, the scores here are a bit sort of higher than they would be if this system only had 8 GB of RAM. So I think this system is saved sort of getting almost 3,000 points thanks to perhaps the RAM amount of 16 GB. So I wouldn't buy a system like this and use it with 8 GB of RAM. So either I would get one with 16 pre-installed, or buy it with 8 and then buy a separate stick of RAM with another 8. Now I don't know the compatibility with RAM for these systems, but both in this system and the previous one we had a look at, we had different sticks of RAM and they both ran just fine. These PCs have been running more or less 24/7 in my case, and no blue screens or instability of any kind. So I haven't had issues with the RAM yet, at least. Now let's I also pressed the view results online button here, so let's check that out. And what do we see here? Well, this system is better than 9% of all results. I think that is higher than we had in the previous computer video with the 6500T CPU, right? But still, the office laptop of 2023, which would be an Intel Core i7-1360P CPU, they say, and an Iris Xe graphics, which of course is a lot more capable. And an SSD, which is probably newer, would get about 5,848 points. And we got 2,977. But it will be very interesting to see if this is an upgrade from the 6500T or not, because this system is almost priced sort of at the same price point as the previous system, so would be very interesting to see if this is an upgrade worth considering in comparison to the 6500T based systems that are very, very common online. Alright, but now I'm sort of up for some 3D Mark. Right, Time Spy it is. So if I'm not mistaken, the 6500T system we tested in the first part, it was pretty much a slideshow. I think we had like 2 to 3 FPS in GT1 here, so this will be very interesting. Can we get like 4 FPS here maybe, or I don't know. The CPU I think is a little bit almost weaker than the 6500T perhaps, but the GPU is of course a small upgrade. Um, 2.3 FPS we're getting. .5, pretty much the same slideshow experience as with the previous HP system. At the first glance, at least, we will have to see what actually comes out of this. I don't have all the figures to the decimal in my head right now, but we're still in a 2 point something FPS sort of range. Power draw is about 25 watts, 26 watts in GT1. Alright, GT2, also 2 FPS, 1.6. And wattage is 28.6, 27.6. So about 29.1 watts, the highest so far. Currently 24 watts. Yeah, about 25 watts. So I would say averaged about 25 watts. Yeah, GT2 was pretty stable at 25 watts almost throughout the entire test. Now the CPU test is interesting as well. The wattage will be interesting. We are running high performance mode in Windows power options. 22 FPS we start off with. It will get gradually harder. 32 watts, now 26. Yeah, 26.5 watts, pretty stable there. We're down to 10 FPS. 6 FPS, 26 watts. Right. So, what kind of score will we get? $423 points, which is excellent, according to, yeah, for this, I suppose, configuration. The average seems to be at about 380, and the best score in the search results online seems to be 716, sorry. So graphics score 373, CPU score 1820. Will be very interesting to see where we end up in comparison to the previous system and also the upcoming system for the next generation of HP PCs that I have. So, yeah, but let's compare this online, shall we? Right, we are online, and well, better than 0% of all results. I think we had the same thing on the previous generation of the HP PC that we had a look at. But yeah, so an office laptop, in this case a Core i7-1360p from 2023 would be 1671 points or there around. So yeah, not a huge amount of points, in other words, but yeah. But let's try to compare a bit in the search results. So HD graphics 620. I don't know if I said 630 sometimes during this video, but it was the Intel HD graphics 530 on the previous generation that we had a look at in the previous video, and this is the HD graphics 620 in this machine, and 3D mark times by let's have a look. So what did we get? 423 points. What? 423. Okay. So all these points are very close to each other. Like 423 points puts us in 83rd place. But if we would have 430 points, it would be in 41st place. So yeah, but yeah, our scores are pretty in line. Someone here got 716. That must have been a very interestingly overclocked system with a graphics score of 652. So yeah, some overclocking there. I don't think we can overclock this system though. So anyway, but yeah, our scores are in line with this system's sort of expected values. So next up, I think is Firestrike. Right, power draw 29 watts. FPS around 5 or 6 FPS. yeah, GT2 4.6 FPS currently, and 29 or 30 watts. 29 to 30 and a half watt. So 5.7, 5.5 FPS, 25 watts, 4.3 FPS, and here we get 15 FPS and 23 watts. Yeah, 23 watts in the physics test. And now we have the combined test left. Loading this test is about 16 watts power draw. Ooh, not many FPS here, 1.7. 29 watts, 29 and a half, 31 and a half. Oops. What happened there? It felt like the combined test was prematurely finished, but okay, it doesn't complain. We got a score, and we actually got a score of 1065, which is excellent. Once again, the average score for this type of system would be 920 points. The best score is 1166, so 101 points away from the best score for this CPU-GPU combination, so to speak. Graphics score 1173, physics 4925, and combined score 372. So yeah, let's compare this online. Comparing this online, we see that we're better than 3% of all results. And the Office laptop from 23 would be 4,806 points. So we're quite far away from that, but yeah, better than 3% of all results. Very interesting. Now, 1065 points. Let's see where we end up. The CPU is 7200U. GPU is HD 620. And we want Firestrike. What do we have? 1065? Yeah, we're in 15th place right off the bat, just like that. So that's not bad for this system. The top score was 1166. Yeah. So I would say that the Firestrike was more successful in TimeSpy. In terms of where we're sort of ranked, at least. 15th place without any optimizations to speak of, so to say. Right. Now, what else do we have? Yeah, we have the CPU profile test. Let's run that as well. So, yeah, the power draw is 25 or 26 watts, and this test is very slow. We only have 2 real cores, which isn't a whole lot in 2026. Hyper-threading, yes, but only 2 real cores and like a 15 watt TDP power envelope. So we're sort of limited here. I think the 6500T will be faster than this CPU actually. And now the single thread test. We should only see a huge difference between the single and dual threads, I suppose, maybe up to 4 threads with the SMT capabilities. But yeah, single thread performance, so we're getting a power draw of between 18 and 20 watts. So a bit lower than the 25-26 on the dual threads. But this is very slideshowy. And we have a result. 1131 for the max threads. Pretty much the same as for the 16 thread and 8 thread. 4 thread, almost the same thing. Yeah, so 2 threads 839 and 1 thread 509. So there we have it. Yeah, we'll have to compare these figures with the 6500T system, which will be interesting to see the CPU only sort of score comparison as well between the 7200U and the 6500T. Now, we didn't run Night Raid on the first 6500T system. I'm not sure why. Was it because we didn't have DirectX 12 support on the HD 530, or did we just not run it for some other reason? But it is a DirectX 12 benchmark for mobile computing devices with integrated graphics and low power platforms. So this could be interesting. Let's see what happens if we run this. Since I no longer have the 6500T system available to me, I can't sort of test it, but I don't know why we didn't test it. Was it, yeah, maybe the DirectX 12 issue or something? But we can include this here, and then we have in the next part we will test the next generation of these HP PCs. It will be very interesting to see how we perform there as well in Night Raid, because we are on a mobile platform. These CPUs, like the 7200U, is a mobile CPU, and the GPU is an iGPU. So yeah, in a game like this, we have 25 FPS and 33.6 watts. 32.6, 30.3, 28, 25, 26 watts. Yeah, so a game like this you would be sort of able to play in 22 FPS. At least it's not a slideshow. That's always good. Now this test has 2 parts to it, GT1 and GT2, graphics test 1 and 2. So first part has been dealt with. Now the GT2. We're getting 30 or so FPS and we have a power draw of 25 watts. Oh, we also do have a CPU test actually. Yes. So that is also interesting. Power draw is 28.5 watts. Very stable at 28 to 28.7. And this is more of a slideshow. This looks a lot like the CPU test in TimeSpy. And we have a score, which is once again excellent. 4,710 points. The best score would be 5,012 for the CPU-GPU combination, and the average is 4,042. So 4,710 is not bad. Graphics score 5274, CPU score 2934. And yeah, I think that with the 6500T system we had in the previous part, we had sort of almost the opposite. The graphics score was, if I remember correctly, was sort of the part dragging us down with the HP 530 iGPU, while the CPU actually had some performance to it with the 6500T. Here we have sort of the opposite. The graphics chip is a little more beefy, if you can say that, but the CPU is not as beefy. So yeah, let's compare this online. We can see online that a score of 4710 is better than 6% of all results. So it's still not a huge performer, but the Office laptop from 23 would be 16,304 points. So we're pretty far away from anything exciting, so to speak. Yeah, but we will note these figures down as well. We don't have any data for this test for the 6500T system, but we will be able to compare this one to the next generation of HP Mini PCs. So now that we have run these tests, I think it's time to actually compare the figures and have a discussion of value there and how they perform in comparison to each other. That will be the most sort of interesting part for me, to see how these two systems of different generations actually perform in comparison to each other, especially since this CPU is newer generation, but it's a U-class CPU. It's 7200U with only two real cores, but hyper-threading. In the previous system, the 6500T CPU was 4 cores, 4 threads, but the GPU, the iGPU, was a 530, Intel HD 530, while we have an Intel HD 620 here. Yeah, so let's jump right into that now. All right, so I have imported the numbers into Excel, and we have the 6500T system from part 1, and we have the current system, the 7200U CPU. So as the numbers here show, we can zoom in a little bit. So for memory read, memory write, and memory copy, and memory latency, the figures are pretty much equally sort of distributed here. Um, Not too exciting, perhaps, since we do have the same uh, DDR4 memory and speed, so maybe a little bit lower latency on the newer system. However, if we move over to, so this is for AIDA64, as you might have noticed, uh, the checkmate, we have quite a large gap actually. So 600 and 400. Percentually, that's pretty significant, and in favor of the 6500T system. So despite being an older system, so to speak, it's faster, and the CPU is stronger, even though it's a 6000 series instead of a 7000 series. It has 4 cores, 4 threads, as compared to the 7200U's 2 real cores and 4 threads. In PhotoWorks, we once again see that we have a pretty significantly larger number in megapixels per second for in favor of the 6500T. And as far as compression goes, we also see the same sort of pattern. AES also almost twice the number of megabytes per second. And hashing, not twice, but still a significant increase. FPU Julia has a huge increase. FPU Mandel has almost a twice, 2 times increase. Sin Julia also a large increase, and FP32 Ray Trace, Killer Race. Once again, the 6500T system, um, it beats the 7200U system by quite some margin in most tests. And let's scroll over to a chart here. So the orange line is the 7200U, and the blue line is the 6500T. Now, as you can see, the orange bars are, well, always smaller than the blue bars. So, yeah, and except for a couple of cases, memory read and memory write, and also memory latency, but that's not too visible over here. However, yeah, so I would say it's not looking too good for the 7200U. And as far as I can remember, the wattage, the power draw, maybe we saw a little bit higher power draw with the 6500T system, but it is also more powerful in terms of performance, it seems. So efficiency wise, I would say it's not a clear win for the 7200U, especially not if you're sort of doing computationally heavy stuff. But if you're just mostly idling in desktop, then yeah, you can save a couple of watts perhaps during idle, and perhaps web browsing, stuff like that, YouTube watching and stuff. But if you plan to do long running sort of gaming, if possible, and maybe some video editing, then I don't think that efficiency wise, I don't think the 7200U gives you any advantage. Um, I made another chart that looks like this, and I found it pretty interesting because not having to calculate the exact percentages, but instead we can see sort of the distribution of points between the two systems. So, for instance, if we add the points of every specific test, like in FP64 ray trace. We add the points from you can see it was 2,318 points for the 6500T, and it was 1,385 points for the 7200U. Now, if we add those together, we get a sum, and then we get sort of the percentage wise of that sum uh, for each PC. So, of the total point sum of the two systems, the 6500T achieves well, it looks like 62, 63, 62, 63% of the total score for the both systems. So if we check the 50% mark over here, um, every time the blue line is larger to the right across the 50% line, it means it's a win. And for the 6500T, and respectively a loss then for the 7200U in that case. So we can see that the only real wins here are for the memory read and write for the 7200U. And of course, latency is the other way around. So you want a low latency, and in that case, the 7200U wins because it has a lower latency than the 6500T had. Um, but as far as memory copy and all other tests here in Ada64, it is actually the case that the 6500T system, despite being sort of an older generation, it still wins on raw power, raw computing power from a CPU. In this case, these are sort of CPU based tests. So, yeah, there we have it. So, based on these applications like hashing and cryptography and compression, decompression, photo editing, stuff like that, CPU intensive tasks, I would say I would go for a 6500T, and I believe that system is cheaper, maybe, or pretty much in the same ballpark cost wise if you want to buy it used. So I wouldn't recommend looking for these new because these are too old to find new. But on the second-hand market, I think you can get a nice little system for connecting to some portable monitor or a TV or something. 1080p would be recommended, of course, at the max. And yeah, so there we have it. I was a bit surprised, even though I did sort of anticipate that. Yeah, the 7200U, it's a newer generation, but it's weaker, and it's a sort of U class CPU, while the 6500T is a T class CPU, and it has four real cores. So yeah, there we have it. So let's move over to the next PC mark. So for PC mark, we have something that looks like this. We have different sections. Essentials covers, well, there is an essentials score overall for essentials. And we can see that the two systems are very similar in score here. There's less than 100 points between them. And even though the 7200U, well, loses, but they're pretty much equal, I would say. 5641 against 5568. However, it may be because of the app startup part. And if we remember correctly, then the 6500T system had a SATA SSD, a 2.5-inch drive, a Kingston drive, while the 7200U system had an M2 drive, even though the 6500T had an M2 slot. So this isn't really an apples to apples comparison, perhaps. And the 4,221 points for App Startup, I think, can be attributed to the NVMe M.2 SSD in the case of the 7200U system. So in reality, I think the 7200U system would lose by more points than it did in the essentials section. However, the video conferencing is remarkably equal. 6164 versus 6126. So I would say they are equal. Web browsing, the 6500T wins here by, well, almost 1,000 points, 900 points or so. Once again, I think the 4 real cores here in the 6500T helps it out, even though it's an older architecture. But differences aren't that huge considering, well, the core sort of setup. In productivity, we have an overall score of 7177 for the 6500T system and 5515 for the 7200U. Now that's quite a difference actually. And yeah, and the 6500T wins. Once again, productivity, I think cores are important. Um, sort of raw performance. And well, actually, it's the spreadsheet score, 6546 mainly, that attributes to that win. Because 6546 versus 3391, it has to be core related. And yeah, I mean, that's basically a doubling in performance in favor of the older 6500T. So that's very interesting. And the writing score, actually, the win goes to the 7200U. So I think that if that one is less, the writing, if it's less multi-threaded, then we can see the architectural gains, perhaps, for the 7200U. But the scores here are closer together than these ones. These are greater apart than these are together, so to speak. um, then we have a digital content creation. Now the overall score is pretty close, although we are in the 2000s. So even 300 points difference here is, I mean, quite a lot still, over 10%, right? And well, the win goes to the 6500T. But the differences aren't huge overall. So photo editing, 3719 versus 3274. So yeah, that's not a huge difference. Rendering and visualization, also the win goes to the 6500T with 1786 versus 1416. Video editing also goes to the 6500T system with 2,813 points versus 2,742 points. And then we got an overall score as well, for the entire PC mark run. And yeah, the 6500T once again gets the win by achieving 3,407 points versus 2,977 for the 7200U system. So yeah, I am a bit surprised, even though I sort of anticipated, but I thought the architectural changes in the newer 7200U system would gain some more wins in some tests which aren't necessarily too uh, threaded. So the overall score is on the top. We go backwards here from top to bottom, and we can see that the orange system, the orange bars, represent the 7200U system, and the blue bars the 6500T system. And well, several bars are pretty equal, except for writing, which is the only real win for the 7200U. And the win is, well, it's substantial, but however, considering all the other losses, maybe it's not enough to motivate that system in favor of the 6500T. Because spreadsheet score, we can see it's pretty much doubling, and for the in points for the 6500T. Um, while some things are pretty equal, like the essentials score down here at the bottom, and the video conferencing, and also video editing, and the overall score, there is a difference. It's measurable. It's not huge, but it still. I mean, if you choose between these two systems um, at the same price or so, then there is a clear winner to me, at least, and that's the 6500T. And then once again, I made one of these stacked charts where the points are added together for um, each test, and then we'll see how many percent of the total score for both each gets. So we have the 50% line here, um, and well, we can see that for most of the tests here, the blue line is crossing the orange line, or the blue line is longer than the orange lines or bars. So in that case, the 6500T wins. And the wins aren't always that huge, except for spreadsheet. But yeah, I must say, a bit surprised by actual differences. I was expecting the 7200U to have some more wins, uh, even though it's sort of its core configuration is a bit different. But yeah, there we have it. Let's move over to Firestrike. For Firestrike, um, once again, I'm actually a bit surprised by the results, especially how close they are. Some of the scores. You can't believe they are two different systems with different architectures and you know different iGPUs and stuff. Um, because well, let's just go through it. So for the overall score, remarkably consistent between these two systems in Firestrike. 1057 versus 1065 for these two systems. They're basically equal. Uh, it's like 8 points difference out of 1050 range, sort of. That's remarkable. And considering the different sort of core setups and iGPUs, and this is a graphics test, so sort of the Firestrike is still testing the graphics, sort of. Although we have a physics test, but if we check the graphics, we also have remarkably consistent values. 1151 versus 1173. And the win still goes here to the 7200U system. So I suppose the Intel HD 620 does a sort of an equal job as the 60 sort of HD 530 iGPU. But then we have different CPUs, and well, all in all, we end up at the same sort of a range. However, we can see in physics that the CPU part, which is tested in physics, is of course, well, we see a larger difference there. 6,000 versus pretty much 5,000 points. Um, Despite the newer architecture at the 7200U CPU, it still lacks a bit in raw core performance or raw core count, I think, and therefore the win goes to the 6500T there. And yeah, like I had a feeling, um, I thought that the CPU part saves the 6500T versus the 7200U, which is more or less the opposite. It's saved by its iGPU. Um, but then finally, the combined score is equal to the last point, 372 versus 372. So that's a tie, and that's interesting. Um, yeah, I the combined score, far as I understand, that's having both the GPU and CPU doing things at the same time, and they land on the same score. That's that blew my mind. So yeah, nothing too exciting here. All scores are pretty equal except for physics. So yeah, there we have it. And then once again, this stacked 100% chart. They're all around 50% except for the physics score. So the 6500T, I mean, you don't lose the graphics performance, at least in Fire Strike kind of a game um, or tests, but but you do gain quite a bit of extra CPU power with the 6500T. Now, I'm very interested to see how Fire Strike, uh, if this pattern repeats itself in TimeSpy, because TimeSpy is a little bit of a different load. So let's check that next. Yeah, so in the CPU profile test, we see a lot of interesting stuff, but especially one thing um, surprised me a bit, but I think there is an explanation. So overall, the 6500T wins. In the max thread test, it gets 1792 versus 1131. 16 threads, 1821 versus 1119. 8 threads, 1824 versus 1129. And 4 threads, 1814 versus 1088. So up to 4 threads, it's pretty expected for the 6500T at least to have pretty much the same value because it has a 4 core, 4 thread core setup. While the 7200U has a 2 core, 4 thread setup by a multi-threading. So there might be differences there um, that affect the scores even at 4 threads. And we can see some effects of it here. We actually lost a bit of points here between the 8 and the 4 threads. But the 2 thread test is surprising because 959 points is a win for the 6500T, even though the 7200U is a newer architecture, perhaps, and yeah, and um, it has 2 real cores, but it gets a lower score. So maybe we need to check the datasheets for these 2 CPUs and see if they have different boost clocks and stuff like that. Because they also have different TDPs, I think. In that case,
TDPs, if it's lower for the 7200U, it's still a U class part. So lower wattage perhaps, and then the two cores have to share it. While for the 6500T, it's only half the cores loaded, and more of the TDP can sort of be utilized for boosting. And yeah, and then the single thread test, actually the 7200U wins, but only by 4 points. So that's like 1% or so. Um, but I suppose that why it didn't lose here, like in its two core test, is in that case because of um, all the TDP can be pushed into one core, and then the architectural changes in the newer generation might also help it out. Even though maybe the 7200U, if it's lower clocked, it might be enough with the architectural changes to reach the same score as the 6500T does, with maybe a higher TDP and higher clocks. We'll have to check it out. And basically, we can see that, yeah, in single core, pretty, or single thread, pretty equal, but then two cores is measurable, and all the other tests, four threads and up, is basically, you know, that's huge difference in favor of the 6500T. So yeah, but let's actually look online at the datasheets for the CPUs. Now, here we have a split view with the 6500T CPU on the left and the 7200U CPU on the right. Now, there are some differences, and well, and to compare, I don't know. Yeah, we can, but we have them over here, so it's okay. We can see immediately that we have 6 MB of cache for the. Let's zoom in a bit for the 6500T. But only 3 MB of cache for the 7200U. They're both i5 class CPUs, so that's interesting. Even though, of course, this is a U CPU and this is a T CPU, so yeah, but they're both actually at 3.1 gigahertz up to, so that's the boost frequency, I suppose. Perhaps for single core. And let's scroll down a bit. They're both at 40 nanometers. I suppose that's one of those Intel 14 nanometer plus kind of era thing going on here. And then yeah, total cores is 4 on the 6500T and 2 cores for the 7200U, but the threads are equal amounts at 4. Max turbo frequency is the same at 3.1 gigahertz. And actually, the base frequency is also the same at 2.5 gigahertz for both. However, cache is 6 MB for the 6500T and 3 MB for 7200U. Yeah, anyway, we have double the speed of the bus for 6500T. But then we have the TDP at 35 watts for the 6500T, but only 15 watts for the 7200U. And indeed, the entire system did draw less power during testing than the 7200U than the 6500T. But 15 or 35 watts, if that makes a huge difference, then of course it might be a good idea to consider that. Um, but also, it depends a bit on the setup. So the manufacturer can, or maybe you can do it in the BIOS, but I didn't see that option in the BIOS. But for the 7200U, you can configure the TDP, so you can set it at 25 watts and down to 7.5 watts, and then get different frequencies, of course. So this isn't a fair comparison between the two CPUs. It's a more fair comparison between our two specific HP systems as they are configured by HP. Now, they're both discontinued, but the launch date was third quarter of 2015 for the 6500T, and the launch date for the 7200U is third quarter of 2016. So they are a year apart. Um, and if we scroll down to memory specifications, we can see that we have a DDR4 1866 or 2133 support, and also DDR3L support. But in our case, we're using the DDR4 2133 in both cases. Memory channels are two. Max memory bandwidth is the same. However, yeah, you on the 6500T you can push in up to 64 gigabytes of RAM, while you only can use 32 gigabytes on the 7200U system. So that's also something to consider. I mean, in my experience, the amount of RAM makes a huge difference when systems age more than the CPU difference. So the more things can be in RAM, um, the better, of course. And if you're able to push 64 gigabytes into a 6500T, well, perhaps you won't need to, but 16 or 32 would be nice. And both support 32, of course, but yeah, you have the option of 64, which is pretty nice in such a small form factor sort of build. So yeah, that's interesting. But let's look at the GPU specifications. Now, yeah, we have the 530 versus HD Graphics 620. Now, 620 sounds like a lower end GPU iGPU than a 530, just based on the numbers. Uh, and the base frequency is 50 megahertz higher on the 6500T, the HD Graphics 530. And also, the max dynamic frequency is 1.1, while it is 1.0 on the 7200U. So there is a difference. And also, graphics video memory max is, of course, I think there is no dedicated memory, so it's using system RAM, and therefore 64 gigabytes max possible there and 32 here. Now, we used 16 gigabytes in both systems, so yeah. Graphics, yeah, 4K support at 60 hertz. Um, However, over HDMI, 4K only at 24 hertz. So that means if you want to connect it to your TV and you have 4K TV, then that won't work too well, perhaps at 60 hertz. Because if you have the HDMI, then yeah, and then display port, uh, of course, then 60 hertz, 4K. So display port it is then. So you have to check your TV, for instance, if you're using TV. And a usual monitor will have display port, of course, but maybe you need a display port to HDMI 4K certified cable in that case. Um, but yeah, um, DirectX support 12 on both, so it's a shame we didn't run the what was it called, nitrate test for the 6500T while I had that system. Otherwise, both support all of these technologies and three displays. So I would say, yeah, the iGPU is slower, just on based on the figures mentioned here. On the 7200U, even though the architecture is newer, but it's a lower end part, and that might explain the graphics tests in Firestrike and Time Spy and stuff like that. Um, what else do we see? Um, yeah, can we both support PCI Express 3.0? So kind of, there's no point in buying a PCI Express 5 SSD and get a lot of performance out of it. So it's PCI Express 3 in both. And otherwise, they're, well, Optane support we have here, but that's pretty much, well, it's not relevant anymore. Um, yeah, otherwise, I wouldn't say there's too much more to it. But this explains a whole lot uh, with regards to the, well, results from the testing that we have seen. Right. So there we have it. That's very interesting. That of course this is the 7200U is a more efficient part, at least sort of in absolute terms, wattage wise. But then if you have to run some long running task, it will take longer, of course, on the 7200U, especially if it's multi-threaded. So yeah, but there we have it. Now, finally, let's just check the scores for nitrate. Okay, so unfortunately, we only have the 7200U system for nitrate currently, but we still have one newer generation of HP Mini PCs left, so that will be interesting. We'll add it to a nitrate here, but I would say that, um, well, the overall score is 4710, graphics score 5274, and CPU 2934. It doesn't say too much right now because I only have that score, and then I have the bar chart here, but also currently only have one system. But I would say that yeah, the CPU would probably be stronger for the 6500T. Graphics questionable which one would win, but uh, maybe pretty close to each other. One has newer architecture, the other one has higher frequencies, that kind of thing. And the overall score, I think the 7200U would lose, because the CPU score is probably lower significantly than the 6500T would get. But this is just speculation, of course. But yeah, so there we have it. Now, this has been very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to adding the third system. So if you're interested like me, then make sure you don't miss that. And well, I learned a lot. Uh, Many things that I thought would be different turned out to be, well, different than different that I thought. Well, now it gets complex here, but yeah. Um, so which one should you choose between these two? Well, I would say if you see both of these PCs at the second-hand market, you should be able to get them pretty cheaply. Now, considering the prices of RAM right now, although this is SODIMM and you only need maybe an extra 8 gigabyte stick if it already has 8 gigabytes, but you should factor that in because it can be a huge part of the entire cost of the PC. So because these PCs are both in the sort of $100 range, at least when I bought them, and some time has passed. So, but I think that somewhere there, around the $100 equivalent mark, for second-hand fully working versions. Maybe it will, of course, differ a bit between the 8 and 16 gigabyte models, but just be aware that you need to spend maybe half the value of the PC itself on an extra 8 gigabyte SODIMM DDR4 stick somewhere. So, but if you find them equally sort of RAM spec, but these two sort of systems, which one should you get? Now, for my purposes, I would go with the 6500T. Despite it drawing a bit more power, but that's like maybe 10 watts more, 15 watts more. Worst case, perhaps 20 watts more, but that's like on peak load for CPU GPU. But when idling, it's single digit wattage differences, and also like when watching YouTube or something in 1080p on a TV or something, they're pretty efficient, both of them, even today. They don't draw a whole lot of power. But of course, the 7200U is on paper a lower power part, less heat and less fan noise, maybe perhaps. Now, in my case, the 7200U system, the fan was bad, and we tried to replace the fan. And yeah, so also remember that it does seem to check the RPM of the fan, so it didn't accept the wrong part number fan that I had that I tried to change to. So I have ordered a new fan from AliExpress. Now it cost me 20 something dollars, including shipping. Got some coupon and stuff, so it at least that covers sort of the shipping part. But yeah, $20 on a system like this is a cost. But I like that system, so even though it's not too fast and all that, but it has served me well, and now it's making just some fan noise. So I plan to take that system to my father's place and connect it to a 1080p bedroom TV there. that's perfect for it. Low power, low noise, as long as the fan works well. The new fan that comes hopefully soon. Um, so for that case, I will keep this one. And but if you're buying a new one and like 10-15 watts difference at max load isn't a deal breaker, then I would go for 6500T, despite it being an older generation part. But it has two real cores more and no hyper-threading, but two real cores more. So you have a real 4-core CPU, and you can push 64 gigabytes of RAM into that thing if you want to as well. That's always nice, even though maybe you won't do that from day one. But it can prolong the life of the system substantially, um, because if you wanted to have to browse the web and have a lot of well tabs open, those 16 gigabytes or 8 or 16 will well be gone pretty fast, I would say. So 32 gigabytes would be nice, but 16 is probably sufficient if you have 10 tabs or something. Um, but yeah, I would recommend between these two the 6500T, just because of a more well balanced system. Even though the generational changes are there, and we can see that in the CPU profile, that well, the CPU is the weak Achilles heel for the 7200U, but also in graphics like TimeSpy. The 6500T, despite being older, it still does well, and I mean it beats the 7200U even graphic test. So I mean the CPU is still needed in the graphics test as well, and the GPU, the iGPU in the 7200U, the HD 620, has lower frequencies, but performs pretty much the same, of course. Let's just see here, but yeah, I would say the 6500T is more well balanced between the CPU and GPU part. So I would go with that one. But like I said, I'm keeping this 7200U because it's perfect when you want the lowest possible power draw, like a 24/7 always on PC connected to some TV in a bedroom kind of thing. Then it's pretty good. If you're not gaming on it and you just need enough performance for web browsing and stuff, then it works. But if you want the most for your money, the most performance for your money, between these two, I would choose the 6500T. All right. So anyway, look forward to part 3. That will be very interesting. We will find out what generation of HP PC will we find there, and how does it perform? And yeah, is that worth it or not? Um, anyway, thank you everyone so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Have a nice day. Bye bye.